Get through lean times with this. Hey everybody, this is Michael with Asymmetrical Preparedness. We know that food prices are on the rise big time. We know that there have been shortages. We hear about food, we see food, fertilizer, hay, diesel, meat shortages, the wheat situation going on in the world and countries not exporting it, situations in countries that grow a lot of wheat. There's a lot going on. A lot of nations are not exporting the normal amount of food that they normally do, that we have come to depend on. So, shortages are more than likely to be on the rise and increase prices. So, if you have the room to do things like this, garden, great. But what if you don't? What if you don't have the room to garden? I highly advocate the fact that you do have some room to grow some stuff. Even if you're in an apartment, you can still grow some stuff. There's channels dedicated to that. Check them out. But this idea is guerrilla gardening. Have you ever heard of guerrilla gardening? What is guerrilla gardening? Guerrilla gardening is the idea of going and planting fruits, vegetables, different plants in different areas. Not on your property, not necessarily on other people's property either, unless you have friends that you can guerrilla garden kind of on their property, and or national forests, national parks, state forests, state parks, those kind of things. We're going to talk about some good plants to plant. I'm going to show you some of them. But first off, if you guys could please subscribe. Please hit that thumbs up, comment, share the videos. They're still hitting us hard. I apologize. They're not showing up in feeds. They're unsubscribing people. I mean, we've lost 20 plus subscribers over 3 weeks. I mean, come on. It's getting really frustrating and pathetic. But we know they do that. They don't like me and they don't like you. That's why we need to support each other and help each other out. Yes, guerrilla gardening. So what do you want to plant there? It's not like making a full garden, like going out there tilling and stuff like that and putting in beds and stuff like that. That's not what I'm talking about. It's where you're just planting things that will grow with minimum maintenance. It's basically like if you have a bunch of extra potatoes or a bunch of extra onions or something like that laying around, or you scored on this, or there's some other plants I'm going to get into also. And so the idea is that you just go plant these foods in areas that you don't own. And then you just kind of let them go. Just leave them alone. And they grow. And then these different locations you have around that you've guerrilla gardened, that there's food there. Check back on them every once in a while maybe to see, are they actually growing? Because they won't all. That's okay. The idea is just spread it out. Spread out a food supply. Some other hints are a lot of people are like, I was thinking the other day, I was out driving with my family, and I was thinking I could see all these huckleberries along the road, and blackberries, and horsetails, and cattails, and skunk cabbage, and dock, and plantain, and all these edible foods. But I was remembering that on the sides of roads, they get a lot of dirt, a lot of dust, a lot of exhaust, and they spray along roads. So don't plant your guerrilla garden right like along a road. That's not the best idea. The best idea is like maybe an empty lot, areas where they've clear cut or something like that, and it's not like they're going in there building a housing project. I'm not saying doing anything that's going to get you in trouble. There are a lot of places like this that you can find. I'm sorry about clearing my throat. I'm still getting that stuff up out of my lungs from being sick. It was nasty. Like I said. Sorry. Okay, so speaking of plants that you can grow in situations like this, what kind of things can you grow? Try to look for things that are more, drought resistant, because you're not going to be there watering them all the time. You're not going to be there fertilizing them, putting compost down, stuff like that. So what kind of things grow easy or grow well in adverse situations? And it may not even be like a vegetable or something that you're normally used to eating. It may be more like planting dock somewhere, or plantain, or some of these other plants like that. Blackberry cuttings, and putting them in different places so they can grow blackberries. Around here, we don't need to do that. We need to cut blackberries down. It's crazy. But some invasive species, and species that will grow back year after year. So it's not necessarily that you're planting just for this season. You could just let it go. It's not something you're relying on, but say a year from now, I think more like 6 months from now, SHTF, when stuff goes crazy, but say it's 2 years from now, 3 years from now, then you go back and it comes back year after year. And you're probably going to end up with more the amount of food in that location because it's been allowed to grow for a while. So what are some plants? One plant I'm going to talk about, I'm looking at it right in front of me, is mint. Mint, spearmint, lemon balm, things in that family. Because they'll take over an area. And that's awesome, zero maintenance. I'm looking at a big pile of earth. Actually, let me just show it to you. This is what I'm talking about. That is a pile down in there that what I did is I pulled up when I was first learning gardening. I didn't really know much. It was like 3 or 4 years ago. And I didn't realize that a lot of these herbs, I'm used to just pulling up, cleaning up my raised beds at the end of the season. So what I did is I pulled it all up and I just tossed them over here, figuring I'd do it later. Well, they grew back. And this is mint, spearmint, lemon balm, oregano, are all just growing crazy down in there. See, there's the oregano down in there, and you see like the spearmint and the mint, all that stuff. Some lemon balm, yeah, the lemon balm's in there. That's good lemon balm right there. But anyway, yeah, that's what I did. I just threw it over there and it grew. So that's an example of guerrilla gardening. Those are just herbs and mints. Those are great for seasoning and stuff like that. And they will grow over an area very well. Guerrilla gardening, mint would be a great thing to do. But that's not a bunch of calories, right? We got to have some calories. We got to eat. We got to sustain life. So what kinds of things can you do? Potatoes are really good. Just because potatoes will grow, they'll keep on growing, and they're not picky about their growing environment, really. I mean, I have potatoes growing in what was supposed to be one of my compost bins. I have potatoes growing on the other side of my compost bin where there's a bunch of cardboard boxes that were just laying down there. Some potatoes fell in there or something like that. And so they're growing up just in the cardboard boxes that are composting down. So on the other side, I had a bunch of turf that I pulled out of the area where I built. Let me see if you can see. Yeah, that raised bed over there. Yeah, actually, no, that's the compost bin. But anyway, raised bed over there. Actually, you should be able to see it. Yeah, it's right in there. It's just the grass. Yeah, I know. I need to get a new weed eater. That's another thing on the list. But the turf we pulled up from there, I just dumped on the left side of the compost bin. And when I saw the potatoes growing on the right side of the compost bin, I'm just like, oh. So I grabbed 6 potatoes. I just shoved them down in the turf and the dirt on the other side of the compost bin, and they're going to grow. They'll grow fine. You know, find places like that. You can grow things a lot of places. You'd be surprised. But another thing, they're even in a guerrilla gardening situation. I'll show you right now. Guerrilla gardening situation here, right off of our little road here. And we don't spray. So they're okay being all right off the road. It was just a dead space right here that I had on the edge of my property and the road by the Japanese knotweed and our berryville area that we're making, and then our potatoes and the raised bed with the turnip greens behind me where there's a tripod where I just was. So I just walked over here, and what do we have over here? See a lot of green, right? What are these? These things you can see are taller that are starting to come up here. Those are Jerusalem artichokes. Jerusalem artichokes are a tuber. I've talked about it in the past. I talked about it last season. I've talked about it some this season. They are very high in protein. They're like 28% protein. They're high in the glycemic index, so they're good for people with diabetics. But because of that, they do provide or produce some gastrointestinal pain for some people, meaning gas. But they're an invasive species. They are drought resistant. They grow, these stalks right here, like you see, will grow 10 to 14 feet tall. And they don't have to have direct sunlight like you see here. This is, it's underneath the branches of a tree. And they still grow fine. So what I did here is I planted this, so you can see this row of them. You can see that these are what I'm talking about. These things here, right there, right here, these. You can see the row of them going all the way down there. There are like, I think I counted, 48 plants or something like that in there. Some of them are still a bit smaller, but I'm just gonna let them grow. And one cool thing is, between the tree right here you see and these bushes here, they will grow up tall and provide kind of some privacy also. But they get cut back every year, so it's not year-round privacy, but it will provide some privacy, and I'm just gonna let them grow. They can take over that whole area, I don't care. That's kind of guerrilla gardening. That's the idea behind it. Here, while we're here talking about Jerusalem artichokes, we'll take a walk over here and I'll show you the Jerusalem artichokes in the raised bed. That's them right there. Obviously, those were left over from last year. I just didn't harvest most of them, and I just let them grow back. So this year we're going to have to seriously thin the tubers in there because they're going to be massive. They'll probably be pushing that dirt all up out of that raised bed. And I'm going to plant a lot of the tubers in guerrilla gardening situations, on friends' properties, on properties, private properties that we group members, tribe members own, that we go shooting on, training on, stuff like that, as well as odd different areas on my property. So Jerusalem artichokes are a great thing to guerrilla garden with because they are an invasive species. They will just take over an area. So, and see, they're not from Jerusalem, they're not from the Middle East, they're native to North America, and they're not artichokes. Like I said, they're tubers. They're like potatoes. You can cook them in any way you cook potatoes. We make home-style potatoes, and we dice up some Jerusalem artichokes in there with them. You can make scallop potatoes, and then throw in some Jerusalem artichokes. Usually I mix the two because of the gas pain issue thing, but there's a lot of things you can do. You can also pickle them, you can also can them for later use, etc. What I usually do is I don't really put them in jars for later use. I just leave them on the ground for later use. So that's one way. And then thinning them, and then planting them in other areas of our property, neighbors' property, that as long as they're okay with it, areas that you don't necessarily care about, and just let them take over. So you got the tubers, you got mints, you got blue. Depending on this is dependent on your area. You can get some blueberry starts from your blueberry bushes, and you can plant those in different areas. Raspberries we could do around here also. Blackberries, like I said, I could also do. Huckleberries, I could also do. I can go out in the woods, dig up huckleberry bushes, plant them somewhere in a guerrilla gardening situation, and they'll probably just go crazy. And then you can do the things that are like invasive species, like just weeds. Most people thinking they're weeds, like dandelions, dock, plantain. There are so many different things, but you can also do onions and garlic. Onions and garlic grow pretty prolifically, so that you can just go plant them somewhere and they'll probably just grow fine. And this is one of those situations where even if they don't grow, so what? It's not like you lost a bunch. Another thing is strawberry plants. Just get a couple strawberry plants from the store, plant them somewhere, and they'll send out their runners and they'll take over an area also. So you could get a bunch of strawberries there. I'm just kind of looking around to see what else, if I'm thinking about things that you could use in a guerrilla gardening situation. Basically look for things that will grow back year after year. It could even be fruit trees. Although you don't want to put like any kind of big investment in time and or money into a guerrilla gardening situation. Some people also just find an area and they just throw out a bunch of seeds, in springtime. And then come harvest time, They just come harvest them. That's another approach you can also take that is not year after year sustainable, because it's not going to, they're not probably not going to keep on growing back year after year, but that's another approach. Just find an area, you know, rough up the dirt, plant some seeds, and then leave it and see what happens. It's basically no loss. You know, it doesn't cost much money, and it's a good option to have. If you have food growing in a whole bunch of different areas, especially en route to your bug out location and around your bug out location, definitely guerrilla garden around your bug out locations. If you can identify a couple good bug out locations, at least a primary, a secondary, maybe even a tertiary bug out location, that is optimal. So please do that and guerrilla garden in these locations. I don't know what's going on with the light. It's kind of like flickering for some reason. Great places to do some guerrilla gardening, even if you don't go back and harvest every year. But you should be going to your bug out locations on a regular basis anyway to check them out, to learn the area, to get a grasp of everything going on around there. So anyway, guerrilla gardening, it's a really good idea. There's probably a bunch of good videos out there. I haven't watched any videos, zero nada, about guerrilla gardening. So I hope what I'm telling you is, I know it's good information because this is just basics, but I'm not a master guerrilla gardener or anything like that. Just wanted to talk about the topic, talk about the idea, and have you think about what you could grow in your area, what would grow well in your area. Because I can't answer that for you because unless you live here in the Pacific Northwest, I could tell you what grows well here. But get out there and do it. It may save your life someday. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and blessings to you and yours.